everybody. We have got a really great talk today. I'm here with Kyle Buller, who is one of the co-founders of Psychedelic Today. I found these guys online and fascinated with the company, and I'm excited to dive into what they are doing. So Kyle, thank you for coming and hanging out on the Anatomical Gangster.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sue. Really excited to be here.
So I'm curious, how does one get into psychedelics? Where does that come from? And tell me a little bit about Psychedelic Today. Tell me a little bit about your background and what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I bet if I asked anybody from high school what I'd be doing, it certainly probably would not be within the realm of psychedelics. And how did I get involved in this? Yeah, great question. So it actually started when I was in high school. I started to get into meditation when I was like 15. And then I had a near-death experience when I was 16. So I got in a really bad snowboarding accident and almost died. I came pretty close to dying. The doctor said if I came in 5 or 10 minutes later, I would have been dead on arrival. So ruptured spleen, massive internal bleeding. And during that experience, I had a pretty mystical experience. I was laying in the CAT scan machine and doctors were telling me not to fall asleep. And I heard this voice or something come over me and say, you're going home. You're going back to the stars where we all come from. And this is just a transition. This physical life's going to cease to exist, but you'll continue onward. And I felt really blissed out and a lot of love during this time. And after that experience, waking up in the ICU, just being like, what the hell just happened? And as the days and weeks started to unfold, it just felt like my worldview just radically shifted. And being 16, you're already in kind of like a personality crisis of trying to figure out who you are. And coupled with that, it led me to a very heavy existential depression crisis, really questioning everything. And I was just trying to find something to make sense of my reality at that point. And really just had a hard time being here. There was a lot of parts of me that really wanted to escape, and really kind of ruminated on the beauty and the blissful part of dying, and really just wanted to go back to that experience. So it was really challenging, personally going through that. And it wasn't until, so I was 16 and I think I was 19, maybe close end of 18. A friend of mine had some mushrooms, and I took a very small dose, maybe like a couple months beforehand. I mean, nothing to really prepare me for what was going to happen, and had this experience just out in the woods with a friend of mine, and it was really, really profound. I didn't take it we always preach like setting is really important, and I definitely was not in the right mindset. There's definitely that wanting to escape mentality, just kind of wanting to numb out, and I totally got the complete opposite of that. And that experience really shifted things for me. Really kind of helped me to re-experience parts of the near-death experience that I had a really hard time trying to process. And so it helped me to kind of recontextualize both the physical trauma and the psycho-spiritual trauma. And, it really just fascinated me. And the one thing that I just kept coming back to is, how could I eat something that grows from the earth that produced this near-death-like experience? And the similarities between the two just fascinated me, and I couldn't stop thinking about what is going on here. So that just led me to a lot of different research. I stumbled across Dr. Rick Strassman's work, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. And the funny thing is, I didn't stumble across that book thinking, oh, I want to read about DMT. I didn't really know what DMT was at the point. I picked it up because in the subtitle it said research in mystical and near-death experiences, or something along those lines. And it's all near-death experiences, and I picked it up and I started putting these like hypotheses together of, what's going on in the psilocybin experience. Could that be, an oral dose of DMT? And then Rick Strassman's hypothesis was dimethyltryptamine. Maybe that's being released when you're having a near-death experience, when you're being born and when you die. And I kind of put those two together. I said, they were really similar to from my experience. And so that led me down, a bunch of other kind of events started to unfold, and that led me down a path to study transpersonal psychology at a pretty unique little school in Burlington, Vermont. And there I stumbled across two breathwork teachers that trained with Dr. Stanislav Grof, who developed holotropic breathwork. Mm-hmm. I'm just really honored
tell me a little bit. Tell me a little bit about that type of therapy. Tell me more about that?
With the breath work, or what type of
what was the name of it that you said?
Holotropic breath work.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so holotropic breathwork was developed by Stan and Christina Grof. And for those that don't know, Stanislav Grof is a pioneer in LSD research. He was around in Czechoslovakia around the time LSD was discovered, and Sandoz Pharmaceuticals was just kind of sending these ampoules of LSD around, being like, there might be something interesting here. So he was a part of the original research that was going on with psychedelics. And so when he came over to the United States, he worked down in Maryland for a bit at Spring Grove, Maryland Psychiatric Research Center. And by the time the war on drugs happened, all the research started to dry up, and all that research stopped with psychedelics. And
is this all the same time with Timothy Leary and Alexander Shulgin and all of those kind of cohorts who were trying to bring the awareness of, and so many things that you're talking about, Kyle? It's I think that there's this stigma of psychedelics, that people are going out and having these tantric, experiences, and something that you said about using it and actually going into nature. I really think that that's what the plant medicine has always been about, right? Probably some guy long ago was hunting, and bent over and probably touched some mushroom and got it on his mouth, and all of a sudden had the psychedelic experience and brought a whole bunch of his tribe over to say, eat this and see what happens. So I think there's a piece of this energy of both breath that what you're referring to, and really the breath of nature, the connection of nature and how it's all connected, right? I mean, it's all part of the same piece of it, right?
Yeah, Terence McKenna had a theory called the stoned ape theory that kind of hypothesized this. Our ancestors coming down and exploring the grasslands, and maybe there's mushrooms there.
And then seeing aliens and all sorts of things, because you do. I mean, it is an amazing thing what your brain can do, because your brain's producing the experience, right? I mean, it's an amazing thing if you can bring your consciousness into using a plant-based medicine and really being like, my gosh, it's incredible what your mind can produce, what the visual changes are, but also that opening of the mind, those changes in particular components of the brain, right? I mean, it's all part of the process of, am I producing it? And because I have DMT in my body, right? Our cells have it. So is that what's happening? And, I think you said this, and I think it's powerful to reiterate that it's very similar having a near-death experience and having a psychedelic experience when you sort of feel yourself become one with the universe, whatever that means, right? You have that ego dissolution. I'm not myself. I am not in my body. I am not this mind. I am just a spirit occupying a form to have a human experience. It is almost an undescribable experience to have, but that's about the best I can land it.
It's indescribable sometimes, that is for sure.
Yeah.
So that research was happening. It's interesting to look at, like, say, the Harvard Club with like Ram Dass and Tim Leary, and then maybe what was going on down in Maryland, Spring Grove, and just everywhere else. Tim Leary, I think he gets a lot of bad rep, but they were doing some interesting things, and I was really kind of getting wrapped up in the counterculture, so that's why a lot of this stuff got was made illegal. So I guess to come back to the breath work, so Stan was over at Esalen in Big Sur, California, and he was a scholar in residence, kind of digging through his notes, writing books, and I asked him to put on a workshop. And during some of his early research, they also noticed that when people were coming out of some of the psychedelic experiences, intensifying the breath could help to process emotion. And there's a lot of different like yogis and shamans coming through Esalen. I mean, a lot of experiential techniques are coming out of there. And so they ended up developing this technique that just includes intensified breathing, so deep circular breathing with music. And what Stan was starting to observe was people were reporting similar types of experiences on par with what he was observing in the LSD psychotherapy sessions. And so, yeah, this is just a kind of a non-substance way to induce these holotropic states of consciousness.
Beautiful. And now, so from there, this has been, I think, an intriguing time for me over the past decade, watching psychedelics return really in a big way, and so many new research papers, so many small research papers, but still they're happening. Small, these trials that they're working on, this whole opportunity for psychedelics to come into the healing arts again. You have a co-founder and yourself, you founded Psychedelic Today. Tell me a little bit about this pursuit of what you're doing.
Yeah, so we started Psychedelics Today back in, I think our first episode launched in May of 2016. So we're our 5-year anniversary, just passed it. And the other co-founder, Joe Moore, we got linked up through our breathwork teachers, actually. They just kept asking, hey, do you know this guy, Joe? You guys have a lot of similarities. You guys should connect. So we ended up connecting. And, our original goal for this was to really kind of keep some of our teachers' legacy and work alive. And then it started to shift a little bit of, we've gone to a bunch of these psychedelic conferences, and we didn't hear too much talk about Stan's work or, some of the breath work. And we really wanted to bring the breath work kind of conversation back into the psychedelic world, which I think we've done a pretty good job with. So we started off with recording weekly podcasts, just like interviewing a lot of people in the space, the researchers, therapists, and really anybody that's working in the field of psychedelia, to really kind of just expand the conversation and hopefully advance the field with some of the conversations. And our audience was really targeted, I guess, at the psychedelic community in general, giving news updates and trying to dig a little bit deeper. But yeah, it really started off with just wanting to bring breathwork into the conversation in the psychedelic world. And since then, we've been putting out, we just started putting out 2 podcasts a week in the last year. We've grown, pretty rapidly. And it's just interesting. And I think back when I started to get into this, I mean, a lot of people were like, what are you doing? What are you researching? What are you going to school for? I mean, it was just so, kind of felt crazy, but I couldn't deny my experience and my interests. And it's just so fascinating to see the enthusiasm that's really starting to bubble up with a lot of the research that's emerged, and just the mainstream headlines of how the narrative's starting to change a little bit. I think about like a decade ago, it was very different. I still had to be a little quiet. Who do I share this stuff with? And now, I mean, people are becoming really fascinated. People that really did not want to hear about psychedelics are now all of a sudden a little curious. They go, I just read this study. I read this news article about it. So yeah, it's something that started off as just a passion project to kind of preserve our teachers' work, ended up turning into a much bigger project at Psychedelics Today. And what we're doing now is really in the education space, helping people to understand the landscape a little bit more. And we're training clinicians, therapists, and wellness professionals to really understand how to get involved in this, understand all the little nuances that's going on, and really just trying to prepare people for this new wave that's coming. I guess it's already here. It's
so important. And, a lot of my listeners know in my background, my mom has bipolar disorder. And since I was younger, watching those behaviors, and when you're young, you're not really sure, mom's really, all over the place. And then in other times she was just down and out. And it wasn't until I think when she went through menopause, I was in my mid-20s, she really had a real break, and we had to institutionalize her. And so I've watched her go in and out of psychiatric units. And one of the frustrations for me is just this utter lack of care in the mental health space. And in trying to help her, I've talked to so many psychiatrists and psychologists saying, what about doing something like microdosing and seeing how that would work? And it's either that, oh, her brain and the milieu of her brain is so delicate and it could really cause bigger problems. And I'm like, but you're okay with giving her a shot in her arm of some drug that like sometimes puts her into an incredible stupor, and where her manias and depressions are not so radically high and low as they were, it doesn't stop it from happening. But I find most often that the therapist I've talked with, they actually don't know anything about it. They just sort of say, well, you know, she's too old for that. But the research that I've seen on microdosing, both DMT and psilocybin and LSD, right? There's different derivatives that are making these huge transformative changes, especially in depression and bipolar. Can you talk a little bit about how you're seeing this change in the utilization of psychedelics?
Yeah, we just actually had a researcher, Benjamin Mudge, on our recent episode talking about this, exact topic of bipolar. And, it's really interesting. And something that he brought up is usually people that meet a bipolar disorder in that criteria usually get excluded from any sort of research. So it's really hard to tell if psychedelics could be helpful for people with bipolar disorder because they typically get excluded. And I think you're bringing up like a really interesting point that, psychiatry is okay giving them, other drugs, but excluding them from, certain research that these substances may be beneficial. I don't think the data is there just because the research hasn't been there. But from our conversation with others that have been working in the field, and we have a great article on bipolar disorder as well on our blog exploring this topic, that there have been people that found benefit from it. And obviously, it's self-report subjective, but I think it's important because it's a population that isn't getting, I guess the resources to, be able to get access to this and also be included into the research. And I think there's a little bit of like a scare of, what happens if we do give a psychedelic to somebody that fits that diagnostic criteria and they have a manic episode, and then, where's the liability fall on there? And I think, and to some degree, there's some of that like, harm reduction, like they're really looking after people of not making sure people are safe. And so that's one of the reasons why they're excluding them. But at the same time, a lot of these folks are also self-experimenting. And, I think it's really important to be able to do the research so we understand really what's going on here and how we can best serve these populations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a vast difference between just, taking some mushrooms and going to a party and actually being in a controlled environment and monitoring the brain's pathways and seeing how it's affecting the actual mindset. And, one of the things that you kind of called out, I want to point this out, that all depression is subjective, right? I mean, one person's reason and sometimes there's no reasons. With my mom, sometimes I'll say to her, Mom, how are you feeling? Are you down? Like, are you worried about something? And the words when she says, I feel nothing. I don't know. I just don't feel anything. I feel numb. It hurts me to hear those words, because that means like I am completely absent of feeling, right? And when you can't even compartmentalize the why, or you can't, it's like you're disassociated from it. That's a mental health issue that is just impacting, and it impacts everybody's life. It impacts my life, not just hers, how we all manage it. But I think there's a stigma also with depression and with bipolar. I hear, my brother
totally.
Say, she's crazy again. And I'm like, you got to get those words out of your dialogue. We're trying to help her, and you can't say things like they're crazy or cuckoo, or we need to realize that mental health issues span such a wide range, because you're talking about not just an emotional construct but a chemical construct, and being able to control the way that the brain is producing that information. I think what's from my experience of speaking to other people who have microdosed for depression is that it was one of the ones that one of my clients had said to me, it was the first time in my life that brought me clarity that I was going to be okay and that I was safe. And I said to her, you know, when it comes to pain,
That's
also,
huge.
right? Yeah, that you're feeling unsafe. That's why the brain is producing that sense of danger, right? The brain's not doing it for nothing. It feels like you are at risk. And if you're at risk, pain is oftentimes an end result. Are you also finding that with the microdosing, because this awareness is starting to happen, are you seeing more therapists now trying to learn more and actually use it more in a clinical setting? Are you seeing it there, not just in research, but also in clinics?
Well, yeah, I mean, the clinics, obviously, a lot of this stuff's still illegal, and a lot of therapists want to get involved. And that's the big thing of how do I start to do this? And, you know, there's clients coming to me and they're talking about microdosing, and I don't know how to have this conversation with them. And so I think a lot of folks that we educate, they're just kind of in their starting off point of how do I even get started here? I have clients talking about this. I don't really know how to talk about this. You know, there are people that do kind of go into that underground and provide those services, but you know, this is still illegal. And Oregon just passed an initiative to legalize psilocybin therapy. They have about probably like a year and a half to get that established. But yeah, I mean, psilocybin and all these substances are illegal at the moment. So, you know, I guess if you're practicing within a professional license and you do provide those services, you're, taking on that
Taking a
risk there.
And it's crazy that, you know, alcohol is a legal substance which kills people. People know this. My husband is gone because of addiction and alcoholism. It really hurt me during COVID when, essential buildings and stores were open, and one of the essentials was alcohol stores because we didn't want to have a whole bunch of alcoholics who couldn't get their alcohol suddenly, occupying space in a hospital. And like, my gosh, look at our country enabling dysfunction, but not allowing for psychedelic research to happen in this day and age. It's shocking to me that we're still having trouble getting it going, but there's hope because there are certainly some great research coming from a lot of universities and also other countries. In England, I see, I can't think of his first name, but Brian Cox's brother, who's a psychologist, they're doing a lot of research in England about this same topic. So lots of new changes.
Yeah, a lot of great research out of Imperial College, London.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, big deal. I think it's a huge opportunity for some types of change to finally hit America. I mean, we are behind on all of this.
Yeah.
Also, I know that you're doing with Psychedelics Today, you're doing workshops and bringing people in. I've seen it now. I've seen your ads for it. Can you tell me, like, what is it that you're doing for therapists to try to bring the education in? What are these workshops you're doing?
Yeah, we run an 8-week online course. It's a hybrid course. We provide a bunch of pre-recorded material and interview lectures from other experts in the space. And when we meet on Zoom for an hour and a half to really talk about this more in detail. And students get a certificate afterwards, just saying that they've been through the program. So what we're really trying to do is just, again, provide a solid foundation for understanding these psychedelic experiences and how to really kind of get your foot in the door and just really understand a lot of the nuances that are happening. COVID has kind of put a clamp on some of our in-person workshops. We were working on a much kind of bigger project where, it incorporates more experiential learning, coming in and doing like a week long of breath work or going to a state where, say, cannabis is legal and being able to work with that in a way that could produce a kind of psychedelic-like effect. So yeah, we're just waiting for things to really resume and be able to put on some more in-person workshops and really get people trained and really understanding just the psychedelic experience. And really what we bring to the table is this transpersonal approach for understanding these experiences. And then obviously our training with breath work, which I think has been really helpful for understanding somatic processing and learning how to process this information with the body. And we also incorporate, Joe has a background in philosophy, so kind of like this practical experiential philosophy, like, so, we're focused on the clinical aspect, but at Psychedelics Today, we're also thinking about bigger picture. Like, mental health is just one aspect. And sometimes it's pretty limited on what we're thinking about the challenges we're facing in the world. And we need to also think, like, what are the practical applications here at psychedelics, and how can they maybe help boost creativity, problem solving? We're thinking, there's just so much complexity in the world. And, being a mental health therapist, I always I even question mental health disorders at times, right? It's kind of a spectrum. And what's the root cause here? Are they social issues, environmental issues? And so if we're not starting to really disrupt some of these systems, I don't think some of these mental health disorders are really going to change. And so we really need to think a little bit bigger than just the individual. We need to think about system-wise, and what type of role do psychedelics play in that, of helping to disrupt systems right now. And I think psychedelics are a disruptor for the mental health industry, because I think it's also helping us to maybe redefine and re-explore what is a mental health disorder. When you talk about people going down to the Amazon and drinking ayahuasca, and they have encounters with spirits, and they purged out all this stuff, what is going on there? Right? Is this something that's happening on a different level than just, say, from the biochemical model? You just have, an imbalance in brain chemistry, and so we need to put you on psychiatric medications, versus maybe there are other things going on here, right? And sometimes psychedelics open us up to explore these other possibilities of, there's other things that might be at play here.
I think that is just so important, everything you're saying, because it is, I think, you don't really want to put labels on things, because labels sort of limit us into what is the problem, right? Is my mom's mental health issue, is it chemical? Is it emotional? I mean, is it history? Yes, right? It's a yes of all of these
epigenetic,
things.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, I think the neuroscience that's happening today, if anything that I'm hearing you say, and I hope everyone else is hearing it, is that stopping this type of education is slowing down something that we know is important. And so we need to bring neuroscientists and the psychedelic communities and the psychotherapists, psychiatry, just brain health overall, together to begin to expand the research. We need more research. Same thing in the connective tissue and neuroscience. We just need more research. And I get it, it's funding, and there's stigma to it and a lot of fear around it.
Yeah.
Politics, exactly. I mean, isn't politics why the first time around when psychedelics were used in the 60s, it was just what was going on at the time. And as much as you're right, I mean, Timothy Leary did both good and bad, because they were using it in many different ways, but I think that's the start of it. And it's exciting to see it reemerging over the past decade. And I feel like we're just a few years away from some really incredible new research papers coming out. I think it's going to completely, just how you said, I think it's going to disrupt an industry. I love it.
Super exciting.
Me too. Well, Kyle, thank you.
Excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and, just talking about it a little bit. I really appreciate the time. If people want to find out about Psychedelics Today, tell me where they go. Tell me where you guys are at.
Yeah, you can check it out at psychedelicstoday.com. Again, we're a podcast as well, so you can check us out on any podcast platform that you listen, Apple's, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, wherever that is, or you can listen on our website. And then if you're interested in any of the education that we're offering, we have some free courses, we have some paid courses, and that's at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. So you can go over there, sign up for a free course, get a feel of like what we're exploring, and just check us out. We have tons of great resources at Psychedelics Today, and a lot of great interviews. So if you want to dive deeper into this topic, definitely check us out.
I certainly will. And I hope that everybody else listening will as well. Kyle, thanks so much for the time. And for everybody else, we will be back next week with another topic. Make sure that you go check out some of these websites, and I'll make sure to leave all this information for you as well in the notes. So thanks again for being part of Anatomical Gangster.